Hi, I'm Mark Small. This is Civil Discourse Now. This is a special edition of Civil Discourse Now, coming on for just a few minutes to talk about possibilities of summer camp. Now, we've heard the former president, Trump, talk about how he's going to get revenge and retribution against everyone. And he wants to use the military, generals just like the Germans had. Those are really great Germans, great generals. I mean, they lost the war and stuff. That aside, when we've been faced with problems of martial law in the past, most noticeably it was around the Civil War and also during the Depression, those are times of great calamity. The Civil War was a result of a couple of hundred years of slavery, and states that became the Confederacy seceded from the Union all because they wanted to save the institution of slavery. Read their secession statements; they're pretty clear. The Depression, there were a lot of problems because people were starving, and people who were rich were getting richer. So, what do we have today? It's nothing of this sort. It's more like a self-proclaimed crisis by the far right. And when I hear somebody like Trump talk about how he's going to take revenge on people, and he's palling around with dictators. Then today I heard he said that if he's reelected, and he was never elected in the first place legally, that there are going to be three autocratic rulers in the world, in addition to Russia and China. He's being very open about being a dictator, and that's a problem for people like me, because it's pretty clear that people like me will be put in camps, and not kind of like summer camps where people learn to canoe and stuff like that. But that brings me to the question of reality, and it's important to discuss what is real. I would look at January 6th, 2021. Now, there are several views of what happened that day. One, that those were fine patriots, marched to the Capitol, and they were trying to protect people's rights. Okay. Two, they were just tourists strolling through the Capitol. And one son of a bitch had a Confederate flag over his shoulder. So, by the way, if you're maintaining your member of the Republican Party, don't embrace the notion that somebody could carry that Confederate flag through the Capitol. And I know you purists out there are saying, well, that's not a Confederate flag. I know it's a battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia. It was used by the Confederacy, okay? So just look at the second thing. They were just tourists strolling through the building. Or it's a false flag operation. Those people were put in there by the deep state and Antifa. So which of those do you embrace? And I'm going to bring up a fourth one in a second. Is it A, they were there to advance their views? They were legitimately expressing themselves as patriots. B, that they were just tourists strolling through the place, or is it a false flag operation? Now, you can't have all of those. False flag, it means somebody was faking it, people from the deep state and the Antifa. And I'll tell you right now, in our meetings, we never discussed doing that stuff. If they're actually doing it, well, then groovy. Then you're saying that people were trying to overthrow our government. If you're saying that they were just tourists strolling through the place, it's difficult to ignore all the destruction that was there, unless you're going to say that's fake. But then you've got people who are actually like right wing and embracing all that, who are pleading guilty and stuff. So that's kind of a difficult thing to maintain. But you can only embrace one of those as the reality. A fourth is Beckwith, who's running for lieutenant governor of the state of Indiana, and he's going to try to do it through locking up delegates to the state convention. He says God told him that, he said, actually, I take that back. He said the Lord told him. I'm going to interpret that as being God, his God. But according to Beckwith, God said, Micah, I sent those rights to Washington. That was my hand in things. Okay, well, it's kind of tough for Beckwith to try and reverse himself at this point and say it's a false flag operation. And I haven't heard anybody say that they got their instructions from God. So what we're left with is a really bad situation where the former president egged people on to get into a riot. And he said, I'm going to walk down with you. We'll be going there to the Capitol. He did no such thing. This is very real right now. We're looking at the end of our country as we've known it. Now, I know people say that if you criticize the United States, you must be a hater. No. If we don't look at what our history actually is, then we ignore the bases for the problems we face today. An important aspect of the Civil War is that it's economic. The South produced something like 75% of agricultural exports to the United States, largely cotton, but also tobacco, and indigo is used for dyes. They also had a 5-to-4 ratio of people who were free and slaves in the states that became the Confederacy. Now, that was also a huge source of capital for the South. And at the end of the war, that was a giant vacuum in a lot of ways, because the majority of the battles in the Civil War were fought in the South, and their economy down there was destroyed. Then you have 4 million former slaves who suddenly are in the market needing jobs. Now, that didn't just go away overnight. Also, for this lesson in history, the KKK ran the state of Indiana in the early 20s. There were about 500,000 members of it here. D.C. Stevenson, who had been the head of the Klan for the state of Indiana, was convicted of homicide of Madge Oberholzer. She worked in the State House. And people had decency enough at that point that the Klan lost, or the Kluxers, as they were called here, lost any credibility. But those 500,000 people didn't just dissolve overnight. There's been a vibrant, sick pulse of racism in this state for a long time. If we don't recognize that and address it, then it's going to plague us even further. And what we've done is we've tossed money for vouchers been spent on religious schools that propagate that whole thing. It's really white supremacy, Christo-nationalism, or Christo-fascism. So which one is it on January 6th? Was it patriots there doing what they was wanting to do? Just tourists walking through the place? False flag operation? Or was it God directing people? You choose. Because we've got an election coming up in November. And a lot of things could go disastrously for this country. We don't want to elect a dictator. Hitler obtained power by being elected. They used democratic processes in the Weimar Republic. The Nazis did right there at the end. Civil discourse now. I'm going to sign off. Peace, love, happiness.